The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in August 1881, and Victoria Monroe knew her life was about to change the moment she saw the lawyer's name scrawled at the bottom. She stood on the porch of the small ranch house her parents had built 20 years ago, the paper trembling in her hands as the Texas heat bore down on her shoulders, and read the words that threatened to tear everything away from her. Distant relatives were claiming her property, armed with documents that supposedly predated her father's purchase of the land. Victoria was 24 years old, with dark auburn hair that caught fire in the sunlight and green eyes that had seen too much loss in too short a time. Her father had died 3 years ago from pneumonia, and her mother had followed him 6 months later, leaving Victoria alone to manage the modest cattle ranch outside Laredo, Texas. She had done well enough, hiring help when she needed it, learning to manage the books, even driving cattle to market herself when necessary. The ranch was small but profitable, with good water access and grazing land that stretched for 200 acres along the Rio Grande. Now someone wanted to take it all away. She read the telegram again, her pulse quickening with each word. The Harrington family, distant cousins on her mother's side that Victoria had never even heard of, were claiming that her grandfather had sold the land to their grandfather before her father had purchased it, and that the sale to her father had been invalid. They were arriving in Laredo within the week to take possession. Victoria crushed the telegram in her fist and looked out across the land that held every memory of her childhood. The barn where her father had taught her to ride. The creek where her mother had taken her to pick wildflowers. The graves on the hill where they both now rested. She would fight this with everything she had. But first, she needed help. She rode into Laredo that afternoon, the sun beating down mercilessly as her mare kicked up dust along the dirt road. The town was bustling with the usual activity, merchants hawking their wares, cowboys lounging outside the saloon, women in their long skirts hurrying between shops. Victoria tied her horse outside the lawyer's office and pushed through the door, the bell jangling above her head. The lawyer, a portly man named Henderson with a shiny bald head and spectacles perched on his nose, greeted her with a grave expression. "Miss Monroe, I was hoping you would come in after receiving my telegram." "Tell me everything," Victoria said, sitting down in the leather chair across from his desk. "Tell me what they are claiming and what I need to do." Henderson pulled out a folder thick with papers and spread them across his desk. "The Harrington family has produced documents that they claim prove your grandfather, Thomas Whitfield, sold this land to their grandfather, Josiah Harrington, in 1855. They say that when your father purchased the land in 1861 from Samuel Porter, Mr. Porter did not have legal ownership to sell it." "That is impossible," Victoria said firmly. "My father did everything properly. He had the deed, he registered it with the county, everything was legal." "I do not doubt that your father believed the sale was legitimate," Henderson said carefully. "But if the Harrington family can prove that Mr. Porter obtained the land fraudulently, or that the original sale from your grandfather was never properly voided, then they may have a claim." Victoria felt her stomach drop. "What do I need to prove them wrong?" "You need the original documents from your grandfather's transaction with Samuel Porter. You need proof that your grandfather had clear title when he sold the land, and that Samuel Porter's ownership was legitimate when your father purchased from him. Without those documents, it becomes a matter of whose papers are more convincing." "Where would those documents be?" Henderson removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief. "That is the difficult part, Miss Monroe. Your grandfather passed away in 1862, and much of his paperwork may have been lost or destroyed during the war years. Your father may have kept some records, but I have only what was filed with the county, and that is not enough to counter what the Harringtons have produced." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "Then I will find those documents. They must be somewhere. Miss Monroe, I must caution you that this may be a losing battle. The Harringtons have resources and connections. If you cannot produce conclusive proof within a very short time, you may need to consider negotiating a settlement." "I will not negotiate away my home," Victoria said, her voice sharp with determination. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson." She left the office and stood on the wooden sidewalk, her mind racing. Where would her father have kept important documents? She had gone through his papers after he died, but she had been looking for current business records, not historical deeds from before the war. There had been so many papers, and in her grief, she might have missed something crucial. "You look like someone just told you the world was ending." Victoria turned to see a tall man leaning against the post outside the general store next door. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed a trim, wearing dusty boots and a worn leather vest over a work shirt. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, and they held an expression of genuine concern. "Perhaps it is," Victoria said, not in the mood for conversation with strangers. The man pushed away from the post and walked closer. "Grayson Valdez," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I have been working some of the ranches around here for the past few months." "I could not help but notice you looked troubled." "Victoria Monroe," she said automatically, then wished she had not given her name. She did not need complications right now. "The Monroe Ranch," Grayson said, recognition in his eyes. "I heard about your situation." Word travels fast in a town this size. Victoria bristled. "Then you know I have important matters to attend to." "I also know that you are going to need help," Grayson said quietly. "I have some experience with land disputes and legal matters. My own family lost their ranch in New Mexico to similar circumstances a few years back. We did not have the right papers, and we could not prove our claim." Victoria studied him more carefully. There was something earnest in his expression, something that suggested he understood her desperation. "You lost your ranch," "My father's ranch," Grayson corrected. "After he died, my brother and I tried to keep it, but we could not fight the legal battle. I learned a lot about what matters in these disputes and what does not. Maybe I could help you avoid the mistakes we made." "Why would you want to help me?" Victoria asked suspiciously. "You do not even know me." Grayson was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything that matters. If I can help someone else keep their home, maybe it means something." Victoria wanted to refuse. She prided herself on her independence, on handling her own problems. But Henderson's words echoed in her mind, and she knew she was running out of time. "I need to find documents from 1855 and 1861, she said finally. "Legal papers that prove my family's ownership of the land. I do not even know where to start looking." "Start with your father's papers," Grayson said. "Every scrap, every old letter, every document you can find. And then we look beyond that. County records, old lawyers' offices, anyone who might have kept copies. Your grandfather or father might have had friends who witnessed the transactions." Victoria nodded slowly. "The house is full of old papers. I never sorted through all of them properly." "Then that is where we start," Grayson said. "If you will have me, I will help you search." Victoria looked at this stranger who was offering to help her fight for her home, and something in her chest loosened just slightly. She was so tired of being alone, of carrying every burden by herself. "All right," she said. "Come out to the ranch tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do." Grayson arrived at sunrise the next day, riding a sturdy bay gelding and carrying saddlebags that looked well-traveled. Victoria had been awake for hours, unable to sleep with anxiety gnawing at her thoughts. She had already started pulling boxes from the back room where her father had kept his office, and dust covered every surface. "I brought coffee," Grayson said, holding up a tin canteen. "Figured we would need it." They worked through the morning, sorting through years of accumulated papers. There were bills of sale for cattle, receipts for supplies, letters from business associates, old newspapers, and dozens of ledgers tracking the ranch's expenses and income. Victoria's father had been meticulous about record keeping, but he had also kept everything, which meant they had to examine each document carefully. "Your father built a good operation here," Grayson said, studying one of the ledgers. "These numbers show steady growth, good management." "He loved this place," Victoria said softly, running her fingers over her father's handwriting. "He used to say that land was the only thing worth having because they were not making any more of it." "Smart man," Grayson said. "That is why people fight so hard over it." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the rustling of papers and the occasional call of birds outside. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Grayson as he worked, noting the careful way he handled each document, the concentration in his expression. He had capable hands, scarred from years of ranch work, and there was something reassuring about his presence. "Tell me about your family's ranch," Victoria said after a while. "What happened?" Grayson was quiet for so long that Victoria thought he might not answer. Then he set down the papers he was holding and looked at her directly. "My father bought land in New Mexico in 1870, built it up from nothing. When he died in 1877, he left it to my brother Miguel and me. We thought everything was secure, but a man named Patterson showed up a year later with documents claiming he had bought the land from the original owner before my father did. We tried to fight it, but we did not have proof that the original owner had clear title to sell. The courts ruled in Patterson's favor, and we lost everything." "That must have been devastating," Victoria said. "It was worse for Miguel," Grayson said. "He had a wife and baby daughter. Losing the ranch meant losing their home, their income, everything. They moved to California to start over. I have been drifting since then, working where I can, trying to figure out what comes next." "And you think you can help me succeed where you failed?" The question came out harsher than Victoria intended, but she needed to know. Grayson met her eyes steadily. "I think I learned from our mistakes. We gave up too easily. We did not search hard enough for the documents we needed. I will not let you make the same mistakes." Victoria nodded slowly. "Then let us keep looking." By midday, they had gone through half the boxes with no luck. Victoria's hope was beginning to fade when Grayson pulled out a leather portfolio from the bottom of a trunk. "What is this?" he asked, brushing dust from the cover. Victoria took it from him, her heart quickening. "I do not know. I have never seen this before." Inside were older documents, yellowed with age. Land surveys from the 1850s, correspondence between her grandfather and various business associates, even a map of the property boundaries drawn in faded ink. Victoria's hands shook as she sorted through them, looking for anything related to the sale of the land. "Here," she said suddenly, pulling out a folded document. "This is a letter from Samuel Porter to my grandfather, dated 1860. It talks about Porter's intention to sell the land." Grayson moved closer to read over her shoulder, and Victoria caught the scent of leather and soap and something uniquely him. "That is good, but we need the actual sale documents. Keep looking." They continued searching through the portfolio, and Victoria found more correspondence, but nothing that definitively proved the chain of ownership. She was about to set the portfolio aside in frustration when she noticed that the leather backing felt thicker than it should. "Grayson, look at this," she said, running her fingers along the inside of the portfolio. "Do you think there might be something hidden in here?" Grayson took the portfolio and examined it carefully. Then he pulled out his knife and carefully worked the blade along the seam of the leather backing. With a gentle tug, the backing came loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were 3 folded documents, protected from age and damage by their concealment. Victoria's breath caught as she carefully unfolded the first one. It was a deed of sale from 1855, documenting the transfer of the property from Josiah Harrington to her grandfather, Thomas Whitfield. The document was properly signed, witnessed, and sealed. "This is it," she whispered. "This proves that my grandfather bought the land from Josiah Harrington. The same Harrington who is now claiming he never sold it." Grayson examined the other 2 documents. One was the deed of sale from her grandfather to Samuel Porter in 1861, and the third was the deed of sale from Samuel Porter to her father that same year. Together, they formed a complete chain of ownership. "Why would your father hide these?" Grayson asked. "The war," Victoria said, understanding dawning. "When the war started, people hid valuable documents to protect them from raids and destruction. My father must have hidden these and then forgot where he put them, or perhaps he meant to tell my mother and never got the chance." Grayson stood and crossed to the window, holding one of the documents up to the light. "These look legitimate to me, but I am no expert. We need to get these to Henderson right away and have him verify them. And we need to confront the Harringtons with this proof," Victoria added, her voice stronger now. "They are either mistaken about their claim, or they are deliberately trying to defraud me." They rode into Laredo together that afternoon, Victoria clutching the precious documents in a leather satchel. Henderson's eyes widened when he saw what they had found, and he spent an hour examining each document with a magnifying glass. "Miss Monroe, these appear to be entirely legitimate," he said finally. "The signatures match samples I have on file, the seals are authentic, and the dates align perfectly. This deed from 1855 shows that Josiah Harrington sold the property to your grandfather, which directly contradicts what the current Harringtons are claiming." "So I can keep my ranch?" Victoria asked, hardly daring to hope. "Not so fast," Henderson cautioned. "We still need to present this evidence to the Harringtons and their lawyers. They may claim these documents are forgeries, or they may produce additional evidence that contradicts them. But this is a strong position, much stronger than we had this morning. When do the Harringtons arrive?" Grayson asked. "Tomorrow," Henderson said. "I have arranged for a meeting at the courthouse at 10 in the morning. Miss Monroe, I suggest you bring these documents and be prepared to defend their authenticity." Victoria and Grayson left the lawyer's office as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Victoria felt lighter than she had in days, but the battle was not over yet. "Thank you," she said to Grayson as they stood beside their horses. "I could not have found those documents without you. We make a good team," Grayson said with a slight smile. "Tomorrow we face the Harringtons together." "You do not have to come," Victoria said. "This is not your fight." "I am making it my fight," Grayson said firmly. "Besides, I want to see the looks on their faces when you produce those deeds." Victoria laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign after so many days of stress. "Then I will see you in the morning, partner." That night, Victoria could not sleep. She kept thinking about the meeting tomorrow, about what the Harringtons might say, about whether the documents would be enough. But she also found herself thinking about Grayson, about the way he had helped her without expecting anything in return, about the warmth in his eyes when he smiled. She barely knew him, but she felt drawn to him in a way that both excited and frightened her. She had been alone for so long, managing the ranch and keeping people at arm's length, afraid to let anyone close after losing her parents. But Grayson had slipped past her defenses somehow, and she found herself wanting to know more about him, wanting him to stay even after this legal battle was resolved. The morning of the meeting arrived with oppressive heat and cloudless skies. Victoria dressed in her best dress, a deep green that matched her eyes, and pinned her hair up carefully. She wanted to look professional and composed, even though her nerves were jangling. Grayson met her outside the courthouse, wearing clean clothes and with his hair neatly combed. He looked different, cleaned up, more handsome than she had realized, and Victoria felt her cheeks warm as he smiled at her. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be," Victoria replied. They entered the courthouse together, Henderson meeting them in the hallway. "The Harringtons are already inside with their lawyer, a man named Craddock from San Antonio. He has a reputation for being aggressive and thorough." "Let him be aggressive," Victoria said, squaring her shoulders. "I have the truth on my side." The courtroom was small but formal, with wooden benches and a judge's bench at the front. 3 people sat on the opposite side: a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, a woman who appeared to be his wife, and an older man with sharp eyes who must be Craddock, their lawyer. The middle-aged man stood as Victoria entered. "You must be Miss Monroe. I am Richard Harrington, and this is my wife, Eleanor. I regret that we must meet under these circumstances." "If you truly regretted it, you would not be trying to steal my home," Victoria said coldly. Richard's expression hardened. "We are not stealing anything. We are simply reclaiming what rightfully belongs to our family." Judge Morrison entered before the argument could continue, and everyone took their seats. The judge was a weathered man in his 60s who had presided over land disputes for decades. "This is a preliminary hearing to examine the claims of both parties," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Craddock, please present your case." Craddock stood and began laying out the Harrington family's claim. He produced documents showing that Josiah Harrington had purchased the land in question in 1852, and that he had never sold it before his death in 1868. According to their claim, Thomas Whitfield had fraudulently obtained a deed to the land in 1855, and all subsequent sales were therefore invalid. The property legally passed to Josiah's heirs upon his death, Craddock concluded. "My clients are those heirs, and they are simply claiming what is rightfully theirs." Judge Morrison turned to Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, what is your response?" Henderson stood and placed the 3 documents they had found on the judge's bench. "Your Honor, we have irrefutable proof that Josiah Harrington did indeed sell the land to Thomas Whitfield in 1855. This deed of sale, properly executed and witnessed, establishes a clear chain of ownership that leads directly to my client, Miss Victoria Monroe." Craddock moved quickly to examine the documents, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Your Honor, we need time to verify the authenticity of these documents. They could be forgeries." "They are not forgeries," Victoria said, standing up. "My father hid these documents during the war years to protect them. We only just found them yesterday in a concealed compartment in his desk." "How convenient," Richard Harrington said sarcastically. "Documents that suddenly appear the day before our meeting." "The timing is fortunate, not suspicious," Henderson countered. "And I am confident that any expert examination will prove these documents are authentic. They bear the proper seals, the signatures match known samples, and the paper and ink are consistent with the time period." Judge Morrison studied the documents carefully for several long minutes. Then he looked up at both parties. "I am going to order an independent examination of all documents presented by both sides. We will reconvene in 3 days, and I will make a preliminary ruling based on the experts' findings. Until then, Miss Monroe retains possession of the property. Richard Harrington stood abruptly. Your Honor, that is unacceptable. We have traveled a long way and we have every right to take possession immediately. You have the right to present your case, Mr. Harrington, which you have done, Judge Morrison said firmly. But Miss Monroe also has rights, and until I determine the validity of these competing claims, she stays on her property. This hearing is adjourned. Victoria felt relief wash over her as the judge left the courtroom. It was not a victory yet, but it was progress. That went well, Grayson said quietly as they gathered their things. Do not celebrate yet, Craddock said, overhearing. When our expert examines those convenient documents of yours, we will see who has the valid claim. I look forward to it, Victoria said, meeting his gaze steadily. Outside the courthouse, Victoria finally allowed herself to breathe. 3 days. I have to wait 3 more days to know if I keep my home. Those documents are real, Grayson said confidently. The expert will confirm it, and the Harringtons will have to withdraw their claim. I hope you are right, Victoria said. Over the next 3 days, Victoria tried to focus on running the ranch, but her mind kept drifting to the upcoming hearing. Grayson stayed close, helping with daily chores and providing steady companionship. They worked side by side, fixing fences, tending to the cattle and repairing the barn roof that had been leaking. Victoria found herself increasingly aware of Grayson's presence. The way he moved with easy confidence, the sound of his laugh when something amused him, the gentle way he handled the animals. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she found herself studying his profile in the golden light. What are you thinking about? Grayson asked, catching her gaze. Just wondering what you will do after this is all settled, Victoria said honestly. Grayson was quiet for a moment. I suppose I have not thought that far ahead. I have been drifting for so long, I forgot what it feels like to think about staying somewhere. Would you want to stay? Victoria asked, her heart beating faster. I mean, the ranch could use a good hand and you have been such a help. Grayson turned to look at her fully, his gray-blue eyes intense. Is that the only reason you want me to stay? Because you need a ranch hand? Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. I thought maybe we could be friends. I have been alone for so long, and you understand what it is like to lose people you love. It is nice to have someone who understands. Friends, Grayson repeated, something complicated in his expression. Yes, I would like that. But Victoria saw something more in his eyes, something that made her pulse quicken. There was attraction there and possibility, and she found herself hoping that friendship might lead to something deeper. The night before the second hearing, a storm rolled across the Texas plains, bringing thunder and lightning and sheets of rain. Victoria stood at her bedroom window, watching the lightning illuminate the landscape, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. A knock on her door made her jump. Victoria, are you all right? Grayson's voice came from the hallway. She opened the door to find him standing there in his nightshirt, his hair tousled from sleep. I am fine. I just cannot sleep. Neither can I, Grayson admitted. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about what happens if things do not go our way. I will not let them take this ranch, Victoria said fiercely. Even if the judge rules against me, I will fight. I will appeal. I will find more evidence. I will do whatever it takes. I know you will, Grayson said softly. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I do not feel strong. I feel terrified. Without thinking, she stepped forward and Grayson opened his arms, pulling her into an embrace. Victoria pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid warmth of him. They stood like that for a long moment, the storm raging outside, holding each other in the darkness. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together, Grayson murmured against her hair. Victoria pulled back slightly to look up at him, and in the dim light from her lamp, she saw everything she needed to know in his eyes. He cared for her, truly cared, and she realized that her feelings for him had grown far beyond simple friendship. "Grayson," she whispered, and then he was kissing her, gentle and careful and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "I did not expect this," she said. "Neither did I," Grayson admitted. "But I cannot pretend I do not have feelings for you. From the moment I saw you outside that lawyer's office, looking so fierce and determined, I wanted to know you. And every day since has only made me more certain that you are someone special." "I feel the same way," Victoria said, her hand resting over his heart. "But tomorrow we save your ranch," Grayson said firmly, "and then we figure out what comes after." Victoria kissed him again, pouring all her hope and fear and affection into it, and then reluctantly stepped back. "We should try to sleep. Tomorrow is important." "It is," Grayson agreed. "But Victoria, no matter what happens, I am not going anywhere. I am staying if you will have me." "I will have you," Victoria said, her heart full. The morning of the hearing arrived with clear skies, the storm having washed the world clean. Victoria dressed carefully again, and this time when Grayson offered his arm, she took it without hesitation. The courthouse was more crowded this time, with curious townspeople wanting to see the outcome of the dispute. The Harringtons were already seated with their lawyer, and Richard gave Victoria a cold look as she entered. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order, and then summoned the expert he had hired to examine the documents. The expert, an elderly man named Professor Caldwell, who specialized in authenticating historical documents, took the stand. "Professor Caldwell, what are your findings?" Judge Morrison asked. "I have examined all documents presented by both parties," Caldwell said in a clear voice. "The documents presented by the Harrington family, claiming that Josiah Harrington never sold the land, are authentic in terms of age and materials. However, they are incomplete. They show purchase but no subsequent transaction." He held up the deed Victoria had found. "This document, showing the sale from Josiah Harrington to Thomas Whitfield in 1855, is also authentic. The paper, ink, seals, and signatures all match the time period and known samples. Furthermore, I was able to verify the signatures of the witnesses through county records. This is a legitimate document." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Richard Harrington's face turned red and Craddock looked furious. "Professor Caldwell, is there any possibility that this document is a forgery created recently?" Craddock asked. "Absolutely not," Caldwell said firmly. "The aging of the paper and ink cannot be faked in this manner. This document is genuinely from 1855. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Thank you, Professor. Mr. Craddock, do you have any additional evidence to present?" Craddock stood and shuffled through his papers, clearly trying to find some angle to pursue. "Your Honor, even if this deed is authentic, it does not explain why the Harrington family records have no mention of this sale. Perhaps because your client's ancestor did not want his family to know he had sold the land," Henderson suggested. "Or perhaps the records were lost. But the absence of a record in private family papers does not negate a legal document executed and witnessed in 1855. Judge Morrison held up his hand for silence. "I have heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I am ruling in favor of Miss Victoria Monroe. The documents she has produced establish a clear and legitimate chain of ownership from Josiah Harrington through to her current possession. The Harrington family's claim is denied." Victoria felt her knees go weak with relief. Grayson's hand found hers under the table, squeezing tight. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison continued. "I am ordering the Harrington family to pay Miss Monroe's legal fees and court costs, as their claim was made without proper verification of their facts. If they had done thorough research, they would have discovered that their ancestor had indeed sold the property. This matter is closed." Richard Harrington stood abruptly. "This is an outrage. We were told that our claim was solid." "Then you were told incorrectly, sir," Judge Morrison said sternly. "And I suggest you verify your facts before making such claims in the future. This hearing is adjourned." Victoria turned to Grayson, and without caring who saw, she threw her arms around him. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Grayson said, holding her close. "You never gave up, and you fought for what was yours." Henderson joined them, beaming. "Congratulations, Miss Monroe. Your ranch is secure." Outside the courthouse, Victoria felt like she could finally breathe freely. The threat that had hung over her for days was gone, and her home was safe. But more than that, she had found something unexpected through this ordeal. She had found Grayson. "What happens now?" she asked as they rode back toward the ranch. "Now we live," Grayson said simply. "We run the ranch, we build something together, we see where this goes." "You really meant it when you said you were staying?" Victoria asked. "Every word," Grayson said. "If you will have me as more than just a hired hand, I want to be your partner, Victoria, in the ranch and in life." Victoria's heart soared. "I want that too. I want it more than I thought possible." They spent the rest of the ride in comfortable silence, but Victoria's mind was racing with possibilities. For so long, she had been focused only on survival, on keeping the ranch running and honoring her parents' memory. But now, with the legal threat resolved and Grayson beside her, she could think about the future in a way she had not allowed herself to before. Over the following weeks, they fell into a natural rhythm. Grayson proved to be an excellent rancher with good instincts and strong work ethic. But more than that, he was an excellent partner. He consulted Victoria on every decision, respected her knowledge of the land and cattle, and never tried to take over or diminish her role. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, talking about everything and nothing. Grayson told her stories about growing up in New Mexico, about his brother Miguel and his adventures before losing the ranch. Victoria shared memories of her parents, showing Grayson the places on the ranch that held special meaning. One evening in late September, as the worst of the summer heat finally began to break, Grayson took Victoria's hand as they watched the sunset. "I have been thinking," he said carefully, "about us, about the future." "I have been thinking too," Victoria admitted. "About what I want, what kind of life I want to build here." "And what do you want?" Grayson asked. Victoria turned to face him fully. "I want you. I want us to build this ranch together, to make it not just mine but ours. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are beside me. I want to face whatever challenges come knowing we will handle them together." Grayson smiled, that warm smile that made Victoria's heart skip. "That is exactly what I want too. Victoria Monroe, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and your partner in every sense of the word?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Grayson pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Victoria felt like every piece of her life was finally falling into place. She had fought for her home, and in fighting for it, she had found the person she wanted to share it with. They were married in November, in a small ceremony in the Lerdo church. Miguel traveled from California with his wife Rosa and their daughter Anna to attend, and the reunion between the brothers was emotional and joyful. Henderson served as a witness, along with several ranching families from the area who had become friends over the years. Victoria wore a simple white dress with lace at the collar that had belonged to her mother, and Grayson wore a new suit that made him look dashingly handsome. As they spoke their vows in front of God and their small gathering of loved ones, Victoria felt her parents' presence like a blessing. "I promise to honor you, to support you, and to work beside you in building our life together," Grayson said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to trust you, to cherish you, and to face whatever comes with courage and love," Victoria replied. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared felt like a promise of all the tomorrows stretching before them. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch, with music and dancing and food prepared by Rosa, who turned out to be an excellent cook. Victoria danced with Grayson under the Texas stars, feeling happier than she had since before her parents died. "Are you happy?" Grayson murmured as they swayed together. "Happier than I knew I could be," Victoria said honestly. "You have given me so much, Grayson. Not just help with the ranch, but hope for the future." "You have given me the same," Grayson said. "I was lost before I met you, drifting without purpose. You gave me a home and a reason to stay in one place. You gave me love." "We gave each other everything that matters," Victoria said, resting her head against his chest. As winter settled over South Texas, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain, Victoria and Grayson worked to expand the ranch operation. They purchased additional cattle, improved the irrigation system, and began planning for a new barn. Grayson's experience and Victoria's knowledge of the local land combined to make them an effective team, but it was not just the ranch work that brought them joy. It was the small moments, sharing coffee on the porch at sunrise, cooking dinner together in the kitchen, falling asleep in each other's arms every night. Victoria had been alone for so long that having someone to share her life with felt like a miracle. In February, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She told Grayson one evening as they sat by the fire, and the look of wonder and joy on his face made her cry happy tears. "We are going to have a baby," he said, as if testing the words. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Victoria asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Grayson said, pulling her close. "You have made me the luckiest man alive, Victoria Valdez." Victoria smiled at the sound of her new name. She was no longer Victoria Monroe, alone and fighting to keep her home. She was Victoria Valdez, with a husband who loved her and a baby on the way. Her parents would have been so happy to see her like this, settled and loved and building a future. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Grayson was attentive and protective, taking on more of the physical ranch work and insisting Victoria rest when she needed to. Miguel and Rosa visited in August, and Rosa shared wisdom about pregnancy and childbirth that eased Victoria's anxieties. "You are strong," Rosa told her. "You will do well, and Grayson will be a wonderful father." "He already is," Victoria said, watching through the window as Grayson played with little Anna, now 3 years old. "Look how good he is with her." In early October 1882, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy with Grayson's gray-blue eyes and dark hair. They named him Thomas Gabriel Valdez, honoring both Victoria's father and their faith that had brought them together. Grayson held his son with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Victoria said, exhausted but elated. "We found each other when we needed each other most." Thomas was a happy baby, and Grayson proved to be a devoted father. Victoria would often find him in the nursery late at night, just watching their son sleep with an expression of wonder. The ranch continued to thrive, and they hired additional help to manage the workload, allowing both of them more time with their growing family. When Thomas was 18 months old, Victoria became pregnant again. Their daughter, Rose Alina Valdez, was born in November 1884, named for Rosa, who had become like a sister to Victoria, and for Eleanor Roosevelt, whom Victoria admired though they would never meet. Rose had Victoria's auburn hair and green eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "How do we have such beautiful children?" Grayson asked one evening, sitting on the porch with Rose sleeping in his arms while Thomas played with toy horses at their feet. "Good fortune," Victoria said, her hand resting on his shoulder. "And love, so much love." The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch grew more prosperous, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. Grayson's business acumen combined with Victoria's deep knowledge of the land made them formidable, and they earned the respect of their neighbors and the community. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the cattle and learning everything he could about ranching from his father. Rose was more adventurous, always exploring and asking questions, with a laugh that reminded Victoria of her own mother. In 1887, when Thomas was 5 and Rose was 3, Victoria and Grayson decided to build a larger house on the property. The original house held so many memories, but they needed more space for their growing family, and they wanted to create something that would last for generations. They chose a spot on a rise overlooking the Rio Grande, with views that stretched for miles. The new house was built of stone and wood, with large windows to catch the breeze and a wraparound porch where they could watch the sunsets. They moved into it in the spring of 1888, and Victoria felt like she was stepping into the future while still honoring the past. "Your parents would be proud of what you have built here," Grayson said as they stood in their new home for the first time. "What we have built," Victoria corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you, Grayson. You saved more than just the ranch. You saved me." "We saved each other," Grayson said, kissing her forehead, "and we built something beautiful together." In 1890, Victoria became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named James Michael and Sarah Grace. The ranch was suddenly full of noise and chaos and laughter, and Victoria had never been happier. She thought often of those dark days in 1881 when she had stood on her porch reading that telegram, terrified of losing everything. She had fought so hard to keep her land, never imagining that in fighting for it, she would gain so much more. The children grew up strong and healthy, learning to ride horses almost before they could walk, helping with ranch chores as soon as they were able. Thomas showed a natural talent for animal husbandry, while Rose had a head for numbers and loved helping with the ranch accounts. James was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile, and Sarah was quiet and observant, noticing things others missed. Miguel and Rosa visited regularly, and their children grew up close to Victoria and Grayson's children, cousins who were more like siblings. Henderson remained a family friend, helping with legal matters as the ranch continued to expand. The Harrington family never bothered them again, and Victoria heard years later that Richard and Eleanor had moved back east, having given up their dreams of Texas land. On a warm evening in September 1895, Victoria and Grayson celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary with a family dinner. All 4 children were there, ranging from Thomas at 13 to the twins at 5, and the table was loud with conversation and laughter. After dinner, Victoria and Grayson walked out to the porch of their home as they had done countless times over the years. The sun was setting over the Rio Grande, painting everything in gold and crimson. "You remember that day we met?" Victoria asked, leaning against Grayson's side. "You were leaning against that post outside the general store, and I was so angry and frightened. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Grayson said, And also the most stubborn, Victoria laughed. I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose everything. Instead, you gained everything, Grayson said. We both did. Do you ever regret it? Victoria asked. Staying here, tying yourself to the ranch and to me. Grayson turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Not for a single moment. Every choice I have made since the day I met you has led to this, to us, to our family and our life together. I would not change anything. Neither would I, Victoria said. You helped me save my home, and then you made it our home. You gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. We gave each other that life, Grayson said, echoing words he had spoken many times before. Partners in everything. They stood together watching the sunset, comfortable in the silence that came from years of knowing and loving each other. Behind them, they could hear their children's voices, Thomas helping the twins with their lessons while Rose read aloud from a book. The sounds of family, of home, of love. The ranch stretched out before them. 200 acres of Texas land that Victoria's grandfather had purchased, that her father had built up, that she had fought to keep, and that she and Grayson had transformed into something thriving and beautiful. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The horses moved in the corrals, and the river wound its way along their southern boundary. This was what Victoria had fought for that hot August day in 1881, though she had not known it then. Not just the land itself, but what the land represented: home, family, legacy, love. She had been prepared to fight alone, but fate had brought her Grayson, a drifting cowboy who understood loss and was looking for a place to belong. Together, they had found everything they needed. Together, they had built a life worth living. As the last rays of sunlight faded and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Victoria rested her head on Grayson's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. Tomorrow, they would rise early and work hard, as they always did. There would be challenges ahead, as there always were on a ranch, but they would face those challenges together, as partners and lovers and best friends. The ranch was safe. The family was healthy and happy. The future stretched before them, full of promise. And most importantly, they had each other, bound by love and strengthened by all they had overcome. Victoria thought of those precious documents hidden in her father's desk, the papers that had saved her home. But she knew now that it was not really the papers that had saved her. It was Grayson, with his steady presence and unwavering support. It was the love they had found in the midst of crisis. It was the decision to fight for what mattered together. I love you, Victoria whispered. I love you too, Grayson replied. Always and forever. And there, on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the land they loved and the family they had created, Victoria and Grayson Valdez stood together under the Texas stars, living the happily ever after that they had fought so hard to win. The children's laughter echoed from inside the house, and Victoria smiled. This was everything. This was home. This was love. And it was theirs, won through courage and preserved through partnership, a legacy that would endure for generations to come. The story of how a desperate woman fighting to keep her ranch met a drifting cowboy looking for purpose, and how together they found not just legal documents in a hidden compartment, but also the love and partnership that would define the rest of their lives, became family legend. Thomas would tell his own children about it years later, about how their grandmother had stood up to people trying to steal her land, and how their grandfather had helped her find the proof she needed. But more than that, he told them about the love story. About how two people who had both lost so much found each other at exactly the right moment. About how they built something beautiful together, not just a successful ranch, but a family filled with love and laughter and unbreakable bonds. As Victoria and Grayson grew older together, their love only deepened. They watched their children grow and marry and have children of their own. They saw the ranch pass into a new generation's hands, with Thomas taking over management while still consulting his parents on every major decision. They celebrated 50th wedding anniversaries and holidays surrounded by more grandchildren than they could count. Through it all, they remained partners. Every morning, they would share coffee on the porch as the sun rose. Every evening, they would walk together through the land they loved, hand in hand. Every night, they would fall asleep in each other's arms, grateful for another day together. The ranch prospered through changing times, adapting to new methods while maintaining the values that Victoria's grandfather had established and that she and Grayson had reinforced. It became a landmark in the area, known not just for successful cattle operation, but as a place built on love and defended with courage. And whenever anyone asked Victoria about the secret to their success, to their obvious happiness after so many years together, she would smile and say the same thing. We found each other when we both needed saving, and then we spent every day after that choosing each other, over and over again. The documents that had saved the ranch were carefully preserved and eventually donated to the Texas State Historical Association, becoming part of the record of how Texas was settled and how families fought to build lives in the frontier. But for Victoria and Grayson, those papers were just the beginning of the story, not the end. The real story was in the life they built together, in the family they raised, in the love that sustained them through everything. The real story was about two people who refused to give up, who fought for what mattered, and who found in each other exactly what they had been searching for. As Victoria held Grayson's hand on their 60th wedding anniversary in 1941, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, she thought back to that frightened young woman standing on a porch in 1881, reading a telegram that threatened everything she loved. She wished she could go back and tell that young woman not to be afraid, that everything would work out better than she could possibly imagine. But then again, maybe the fear and the fight had been necessary. Maybe she had needed to face losing everything to truly appreciate what she would gain. Maybe Grayson had needed to drift and lose his own family's ranch to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to help her. "What are you thinking about?" Grayson asked, his voice aged but still warm with love. "About fate," Victoria said. "About how everything that happened, good and bad, led us to each other." "Then I am grateful for all of it," Grayson said, kissing her weathered hand. "Every moment that brought me to you." They sat together in the house they had built, on the land they had defended, surrounded by the family they had created, and knew that their story was one for the ages. A story about love found in unlikely circumstances, about partnership forged in crisis, about a life built on trust and respect and unwavering devotion. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, passed down through generations who would hear the story of Victoria and Grayson, the woman who fought for her land and the cowboy who helped her save it. But more importantly, they would hear about the love story, about how two people became one family, one partnership, one unbreakable bond. And somewhere on that land, in a place of honor, the original ranch house where Victoria had been born and where she had received that fateful telegram still stood, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes, if we are brave enough to keep fighting and open enough to accept help when it comes. Victoria and Grayson Valdez lived long, happy lives, their love story becoming legendary in Laredo and beyond. They faced everything together, from droughts to economic downturns to the changes brought by the new century, and through it all, Their partnership never wavered. When Grayson passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 91, with Victoria beside him holding his hand, his last words were "Thank you for the most beautiful life." Victoria followed him just 6 months later, unable to imagine continuing without her partner of more than 60 years. They were buried on the hill overlooking the Rio Grande, in the spot where Victoria's parents rested, all of them together watching over the land they had loved. Their gravestone was simple: Grayson and Victoria Valdez, partners in life, love, and legacy. The ranch continued to thrive under their descendants' management, a testament to the foundation they had built. And whenever new challenges arose, whenever someone in the family faced difficulties, the story of Victoria and Grayson would be retold. How a young woman refused to give up her home, how a drifting cowboy found his purpose in helping her, and how together they discovered that the greatest treasure was not the land itself, but the love they built while fighting to keep it. It was a story of courage and determination, of fighting for what matters and accepting help when it is offered. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple. The kind of love that endures through everything, that grows stronger with time, that leaves a legacy lasting far beyond a single lifetime. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the documents hidden in a desk, not the legal victory in a courthouse, not even the successful ranch that spanned generations. What mattered was the love between Victoria and Grayson, a love that began in crisis and grew into something eternal, something that shaped not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them. Their story became part of Texas history, a reminder that the West was built not just by individuals fighting alone, but by partnerships, by people coming together to build something bigger than themselves. Victoria and Grayson had saved a ranch, yes. But more importantly, they had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found home.